when people are saying like, oh my God, what are you doing? And you know, you're getting all of these things that people are putting their fears onto you about this thing that you're doing. And in the face of all that, how much are you able to go, I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't matter.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art. Welcome to Way of the Artist, episode numero dos, where we're covering a nice, juicy foundation of things. So, if you listen to the last podcast, which I would highly recommend you do, just because it kind of helps really preface this one here. We've got a kind of a 3-part series coming at you to kind of lay the foundation of what we're all about. So, on the last podcast, we talked a lot about finding your path. That was kind of the thing going on there. We're taking on some big questions with that one as to really asking ourselves, what do we want? And what is our sense of purpose? And really kind of unpacking those ideas. How can we even approach those ideas? And get anything out of it? And that whole process of things. Today, we're taking it kind of to the next step. And this is all about embracing the path.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, embracing the path is being on the path, it's living the path. Some ways it's believing in the path that you're on. And we're going to go and kind of take the last episode and we're going to kind of take this further because, I mean, I would say that the last episode was kind of creating some clarity for yourself. You know, getting a little bit more in touch, checking in with you, becoming a bit more of an authority over what you actually want as opposed to what you think you're supposed to want or what you think you're supposed to do. And now that you kind of have gone through that and you go, okay, well, this is what I want. Now we're actually doing it and a whole new plethora of things come up.
Yeah, like because now that we're set up in a nice place of engaging with ourselves, engaging with our own sense of who we are, and maybe shedding a little bit of the pressures that we feel that of the things we're supposed to be and saying, no, I'm on this path. This is the direction I want to go in. This is the vision. This is the calling. I'm owning that this is what's happening. So now that we're kind of standing here, we're looking at this path before us. Yeah. And we're going, okay,
where does it lead?
Okay.
What's going to happen? Okay,
exactly.
What could go wrong?
All of these things.
All this stuff's going to start coming up.
Yeah.
The other thing is I want to say this just from the top.
Yeah.
We had talked about this a bit before, but, these first episodes, we're talking about, your path. We're talking about this path that you walk, this metaphorical kind of journey you're on. That is your own way of going about this. You are the artist. It is your way. And as you go through this, the important thing to remember, especially at this stage, is it's not about knowing what the destination is yet. Mm-hmm. As much as you kind of go, well, I want to do this so I can get there and make this happen and all of this stuff. That if you get too far into the destination, you get too far into like what this is supposed to look like and too far into expectations, what's going to end up happening is a lot of fear and a lot of overwhelm is going to happen. So my suggestion, this is my suggestion to our audience members, is think of this more as, like Evan called it, a calling or a magnetism. In some ways I like to think of it like an energy. It's like, where do I kind of like feel like I want to direct my heart and my guts and my mind and my body? Like, where do I seem to want to go?
Yeah.
Right? Or and then from there, I can find my way.
Yeah, almost like a gravity. You just feel this, like, a pull in a direction. And that's amazing. That's the thing to for us to be listening to be connected to as much as possible. But as we go on, and I want to say, like, as we're talking about this has implications not just if you're beginning on an artistic career or endeavor for the first time in your life. This is also something, if you're already involved, there are so many evolutions that we go through as artists and decisions and deeper layers of our artistry to be uncovered. And in terms of, like, these things, while they might sound like they're a very early off point, we kind of keep finding ourselves coming back to these places.
Yes.
So if you are a practice artist, I would encourage you to take some of this in, because we want to offer some stuff to you as well in all of this. We try and work with these principles that seem to be fairly universal and kind of timeless.
Yes.
Almost. So
something else I want to say just before we get too far into this. You know, I personally have been an artist, and I've been on my artist path, I can say confidently, for about 18 years. And on this journey, there's been ups and downs, there's been twists and turns, there's been surprises, there's been disappointments, there's been glorious victories. It is been a wild ride. It's been an amazingly fulfilling and yet challenging journey. And the thing that I can say at this point that I've really kind of come to is, you want to think of this as chapters of almost like a book. And when you're starting out, you might be on the first chapter. But if you've been doing this for 20 years, you're on another chapter. Mm-hmm. And this is still relevant. This embracing the path, it's you. Every time you start a new chapter, you have a new embracing thing to do with your path, you know? And I can kind of relate to, so I'm just going to share one thing personally. Like, I'm moving from a place I've been in for the last 5.5 years. I've written scripts. I became a working hired writer while I lived here. We started our initial podcast and we recorded 165 episodes in this place. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of life that has occurred here. When I leave this place, for me, in a lot of ways, it's a bit of an end of a chapter. And as I move on to the next place and the next place that I go, I'm in some ways starting again, and I'm embracing a new part of my journey. And so all these things that we're about to talk about today, I'm finding very relevant just to what I'm going through, even after 18 years of doing this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because there's always a next step, a new thing to discover, a new thing to explore within ourselves and within our artistry. So, with that said, where we start with embracing the path, a lot of this is because as we go into something new, something unknown, there's usually a whole host of fears, a whole host of worries that come up. You know, like they can be anything. It's just like, oh my God, who am I to do something like this? Am I good enough? Am I capable? What will people think? You know, like all of this shit, all of our deepest stuff can come out, you know, come out to just haunt us a little bit.
Yeah.
So some of the things we're going to talk about today is what are some very useful things for us to be aware of, to keep in mind as we set out.
Yeah. And we have a couple questions that I think we want to ask you to start this off. And there's things you can kind of ponder as we get into the rest of this.
Yes.
So the first one is, how does one embrace their path? You know, I think this is the thing that we all kind of have to ask ourselves at some point, is like, how do I embrace this thing? How do I actually go and be and live this thing? And it's not as simple sometimes as just, well, do an acting class or whatever. But maybe it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where it's, you know, we're going to get into this. So I really want people to start thinking about how do you embrace your path?
Yeah, because this is always, as always, we can't tell you what your path is. This is something that you need to engage with. It's almost like a dialogue you have with yourself, and to ask yourself these questions and see what starts to bubble up to the surface. Mm-hmm. And it makes things way more interesting as well. And I guess the other question is, what does it take to walk your path? And I would take that question even maybe a little bit of a step further. It's like, what does it take to walk this path with joy? Because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
In the whole thing. So I think some of the things we're going to talk about here now that we're getting into might give some helpful ideas and thoughts.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. So the first thing I would like to start off with in this one is beginning. Just beginning.
Yes.
And how does, like, to just step into starting that first step onto the path. To just begin is the first most important thing. And there are a few things that go with that.
It's the easiest and the hardest step you'll ever take at the same time. And it's the hardest because it's like shifting from neutral into first gear. It's the only time that you could possibly stall. Really, once you get past that point, it's actually hard to stall. You will find that you have a certain kind of momentum. It's actually very easy to kind of switch gears, and kind of change pace and do stuff. It's just going from like where you're at right now, where you're not really kind of directed with any sort of kind of power or force, to being directed with power and force. And that shift, that can be kind of a challenging, kind of scary thing. And the reason why I say it's hard is because we get in our own way. We make it difficult for ourselves. We get overwhelmed. We get all worked up in fears and overwhelm and future. But it's actually so easy. And I think, Evan, you're really good at talking about, especially with all your Meisner training, just be present. Because that is really the art of beginning. If you're totally present and you let it, all of a sudden it's super easy. Mm-hmm. But if you're getting all caught in the future and the past and like, what will my parents think? It's very difficult.
And here's another part of this whole beginning phase, because how do we make the beginning easier on ourselves, gentler on ourselves? And there's a few things I think that are great to keep in mind with this. And one thing, we've already touched on it just a little bit, but a big part of beginning and embracing the path is also embracing the unknown. And that's really a big reason why we have so many fears. So most of our fears are because we don't know.
Right.
And as we learn to accept the unknown, because we can never know. We can never really know everything that's going to happen on the path ahead of us, right? We love to use like hiking or road trip kind of analogies on this.
Love road trips, love hiking.
Exactly. And just like, but as far as like, if we use like a road trip, you're planning a road trip, you can know the place you want to end up, the place that you're on the way to. You might know the roads that you're going to take and, some of the places you're going to be passing through, but you will never really know that trip until you do it.
Yeah. You
will never know every twist, every turn, every curve, every tree, every rock, every lake, every, who knows what is going to happen. You will never know it until you are actually there doing it. Mm-hmm. And it is those unexpected things that are always the moments that take our breath away, that are the things that we remember.
Yeah.
And often end up being the most important things that happen.
Yes.
Because we weren't prepared for them. We weren't expecting them. And that gives us a feeling of aliveness. So this is how we can begin to embrace that unknown aspect of it. It's like, no, you don't know what's going to happen, and you will never know exactly how it's going to happen.
Right.
But that's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, if you take the road trip analogy, you drive your car across country or whatever, you have a certain expectation. You have this, I want to go to this destination. We did it. We drove from Vancouver to Los Angeles. I've actually driven from Vancouver all the way down to La Paz, Mexico, which is twice the journey. It's 48 hours. And I can tell you that the I-5, is much, much different than the highways in Mexico, which are windy and there's trucks careening around the side, and it's just and then there's flash floods that have happened that have wiped out certain areas of the road.
Wow.
It's a different part of the journey.
Yeah.
But, if I expected the Mexico part of the journey to be like the American state part of the journey, when I got to Mexico, I'd be like, "Whoa, this is crazy," And the thing is that that's kind of what happens. You go through different terrain, you go through different environments, and the thing is you might have an idea of what the weather is or what the seasons are like, but there's all sorts of funny things that can happen. I remember on our LA trip. I don't know if you remember this moment. I'm sure you do, but do you remember we were coming in just over the California line from Oregon, and we're driving up that big, massive hill through the mountains, and I thought there was another gas station that was coming up, but we realized as we're quite far into the northern part of California that we were running low on gas,
and it was pitch black.
It was pitch black.
And it was pouring rain,
and it was super foggy.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my God, we might have to spend the night here in the mountains because the car might run out of gas. And this is very great analogy for how, the way of the artist kind of goes for us. Because you go into something thinking, I have enough fuel. And then all of a sudden you get into a situation going, man, I don't know if I have the resources to pull through here. And so I remember we pulled off the highway because we finally found a gas station. We drive off under this weird underpass, and it's super dark and foggy, and we go to this gas station, and it looked like something out of a horror movie. It was the creepiest, it was like, there's no way we're staying here. This is I don't know how to explain it. It's like, it just reeked of something bad's going to happen.
It was isolated and there was nobody around, and it just it was like, we're going to get murdered here.
And the gas station was closed. Yeah. And so we were like, okay, you know what? We're not staying here. We're going to keep going. And we drove over the rest of the hills, and then we were on the downward slope, and then just as I was running out of gas, we found another gas station and continued our trip. And that was such an incredible, memorable moment. Was it what we planned? Was it perfect? It was far from perfect, but it's a moment I remember of the journey.
Was it all... Yeah, exactly. Was it all, because we were genuinely concerned about running out of gas, and we were genuinely concerned about being murdered out in the woods of Northern California. But in retrospect, it was just like, wow, it was such an iconic part of that trip.
Totally.
I totally remember that. And this is part of the process of that unknown, is that there are going to be things that happen. We're not going to necessarily know why these things happen, why these events occur, or why the outcomes were a certain way. But a big part of this thing is trust in all of that, is not knowing, but beginning. And then trusting that it's going to lead us to wherever we need to go.
Yes.
Because, you might as well. Because the other option is we stay stuck in our fears, and that cripples us. It really destroys our creativity.
Yeah.
And it just pollutes our quality and sense of our lives at the same time. So it's really not too difficult of a decision when we can see it that way. It's just because by trusting, by embracing that unknown, by stepping out there, we get a part of ourselves, that part that called us to do this gets to come out and play a bit more than when we stay stuck in our fears of but what if this, and what if that, and what if all these things go wrong? Well, none of these things are real anyhow. Could they happen? Yeah, maybe. Is it likely? Oftentimes not even. But the important thing is to not let these things stop us. So we're beginning, embracing the unknown, trusting that we are on that path that we've set ourselves up for, based on our calling, based on what we want and what our sense of purpose is. We stay connected to those things, then we can engage with that sense of trust. That's like, okay, well, I'm doing what I believe I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
Even though I don't know how that's all gonna play out.
Yes. And these things that we've been talking about, this trust, this beginning, the unknown, these are a sort of principles or laws that Evan and I are going to get into, and many more about your way as an artist. These are things that it doesn't matter what artistry you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing in life. If you follow your own path, you are going to face all of these things at some point. And what Evan and I have done is we've really kind of investigated these things with our own processes and with other artists, and done an extensive amount of research and investigation to these types of things. And what we found was there's a parallel across everything. And something that I've noticed in particular is that when you start following your own path, when you become the authority of your own journey, you'll often find, and I would not be surprised if everybody can relate to this, that it actually calls you into the unknown. It does not call you into the known. And so much of our life are we trying to be going I want to know. But this is the beauty of the way of the artist, is that we're asking you to embrace a journey that is unknown to not only us, but to you. And for you to go investigate that and find that, because there is some kind of magnetism. There's something pulling you into that, and you're going to find it. Yeah. And that's what's going to be incredible, and it's going to be yours when you get there.
And it's an adventure.
Yes.
Too. It becomes an adventure when we learn to fully embrace these things, yes. Right? And it's a constant process. I'm not saying I'm perfect at any of these things by any stretch of the imagination, but the more I find that I'm able to remember these things and to call upon these things and live these things, the more joyful I am, and the more open and creative, things just seem to flow on a greater level. There was something that you said just a second ago, and I thought, this is something that I've noticed that can happen once you've set out on this path, is that you can often find little challenges will suddenly come up once you've made this decision to walk this path. And it could be, I can't tell you what it could be, but it could be, a family member or a friend who says, who casts their doubts and their fears about your choice, right? And that can put us into a state of doubt in that way. And I like to look at these things that happen as kind of a way. This might be way out there for some people, but I'm going there. I don't care. Is that this is sometimes I find is a way of the universe almost saying, how much you want it? Let's of challenging us to step up, to be even stronger, to be even more courageous. Saying, okay, you've made this decision. How bad do you want it?
Yes.
How much passion do you have for this? I don't mean that as a way of being hard on yourself and trying to be a hard person. But I see it more as a playful thing that kind of ends up happening. These playful little challenges, which we can take as being very, very difficult ones. Oh my God, people are going to disown me, or I'm going to lose people in my life. I mean, a lot of artists are I've noticed over the years, have been very concerned about losing people in their lives because of their passion.
Sure.
And the thing is that these are very complicated issues. I won't say that there's one you just got to cut them off entirely. I mean, it's not necessarily that, but it's just understanding where these things are coming from. And there's going to be, it won't necessarily come in that form, but there can be all sorts of things that the world will throw at you to trigger kind of your fears about beginning this path. That hits you all as oh my God, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. And it can just, and we can shut down, we can procrastinate, it can stop us from taking that step. Yeah.
You bring up a really good point. These little challenges that come up, are you sure? Do you really want this? Is this really the right move? They're actually, if you look at them as a negative, you will experience them as these things that are signs that you shouldn't do it or something, right? But I would encourage you to embrace them as an opportunity. And I would say look at them as an opportunity for you to get clear on your values, because there's always going to be a competition, in my opinion, between fear and comfort are very closely related. They're best friends. And safety in some ways. But and then values. What are your values? And the thing is that if you actually get in touch with your values, you will realize that things that were once scary are no longer scary anymore. I think people scare themselves out of doing a lot of things because they don't allow themselves to get in touch with what they really value. And sometimes I think this, we talked about this magnetism, we talk about this like calling, right? A lot of the time your values are what calling you, and your fear is then standing up and going, maybe not, right? But the calling is your values, and you want to look at this calling. You want to look in some ways, embracing the path is embracing your values. What really matters to you? What's really important in this lifetime? And then if you answer that, you might find that I'm not going to be scared of that. Why would I? I only got this life. I better embrace it, right?
And it's also like the values is also like it's embracing the love. It is embracing that part of ourselves, and which of those two things are we spending most of our time and energy with? Are we spending it more time with the things we love that bring us joy, with our values and that calling, which is something that is so pure, that's something that speaks to us on such a deep level, and we fool ourselves from not going that way, from not following it, right? And it's easy. The temptation to buy into our fears is so easy to do.
I like how you said easy, because I think sometimes we ask and we wish for an easy life. And easy, we're wishing for comfort. And that's why I think fear and comfort are so closely related to each other a lot of the time, because fear is in a lot of ways to keep our comforts in place. And the thing is that if you get in touch with your values, you will actually find it's easier to do the thing that was once perceived as hard, and harder to do the thing that was scary. But in the beginning, this is why, I said earlier, right? It's hard to switch from neutral to first gear, because when you're in neutral, your fears seem easier. But when you're in first gear, your values seem easier. But it's hard because that's the shift you need to make. But you can there's a little hack. If you get in touch with your values, taking that beginning action step actually becomes kind of easy. But you can just take the beginning action step and then kind of start experiencing your values. But either way, just almost throw yourself in.
Well, I mean, it's getting as we discussed in our first podcast, which is why it's so important to ask ourselves and continually ask ourselves and watch the evolution of those questions of what do I really truly want, and what gives me my sense of purpose? What is my sense of purpose here? That helps us connect to those values and the things that we love to do. And it's about really spending our time with that, encouraging, putting our energy into those thoughts, into those feelings, as opposed to those fear thoughts, as opposed to those doubt thoughts, right? Which, what do you have to lose? I think I love that you brought up this thing with fear and safety and comfort, having this kind of relationship with each other, because they do have this bizarre relationship, but it's actually a very twisted one, because when we're living in our fear, it's often because we don't want, we're trying to stay comfortable and we're trying to feel safe, but there is a price to be paid for that. There is always a price to be paid for it, because there is something that inside of us starts to feel so uncomfortable and so unsafe after a while, living in that kind of fear space. On a certain level, we feel kind of comfortable. We feel safe in our little bubble. But, I mean, if you're an artist, there's this thing inside of you that's just screaming, and you're sitting there being frozen. Well, right? And it just, and it becomes painful. And then when it becomes so painful, it's the unsafe thing to do. It's so uncomfortable now. You've lost the very thing that you went for, right? That you bought into. And I can speak from personal experience on this, just like not like hanging on my inspirations and not moving on things. And it becomes such a deep ache when we don't move on these things, when we don't follow our passions. So the thing that we actually try to set out for, of that comfort and safety, it ends up working against us eventually. And so that's why it's just learning to embrace the path, learning to embrace the unknown, and stepping out into what feels uncomfortable for us, but actually speaks to kind of our higher calling, is really the only safe choice to make.
I as we're talking about this, and I want to remind everybody about the questions we asked in the beginning. How does one embrace their path? And
how do you embrace your path?
Yeah, and what does it take to walk your path joyfully? Right? And I think the thing is that when you start to think about this, it's your path. It's nobody else's. So like in some ways you got to kind of let go of a lot of what your schooling has taught you, your parents have taught you, what media has taught you. And you kind of got to allow yourself to open up a little bit and start to consider the fact that you are pulled in a direction that is just, it's very unique, and it might look like someone else's. For example, you might be pulled to be an actor, and someone else, many other people are pulled to be an actor, but that's just the one little tiny little bit of your path, and you might be called to kind of express yourself through acting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that acting is your journey. It just means that right now, acting is going to serve your journey somehow. And I think the thing is this is the danger I think a lot of young people go through. They go, I really want to act. I love acting, And then they go, I'm an actor. I need to be an actor. I need to be successful as an actor. Well, the thing is your acting classes might be there to serve you to do some greater thing. And so if you get too caught up in the idea that you need to be an actor because you're in acting class, and then 1 + 1 = 2 kind of like simple thinking, what ends up happening, this kind of almost limited thinking, maybe you are meant to be an actor, but maybe your acting is actually meant to lead you to something. So let me just share a personal story, because what I'm told from people is they like to hear personal stories when you talk about concepts. So when I was 16, I was in school. I was acing stuff. I was in a drafting and design program. I was being primed at grade 10 to be an engineer, to be an architect. So, I was going down this road, doing this thing, thinking this is what I wanted to do. I went away that summer, and I know you've heard this story before, but I think it demonstrates my point really well. I went away that summer and I made a film for fun, not because I wanted to be a filmmaker, just because I thought it would be really cool to do with a bunch of my friends. It turned out to be a really big success. We had an incredible experience. I came away that summer and said, I don't want to be an architect. I want to be a filmmaker. So I literally dropped out of the drafting and design program, and they had like 3 years planned for me. I was like designed to be going into like the to be an engineer in university. And I said, I don't want to do it. I want to go into the film program. But here's the thing. They said, well, the film program's full. Everybody, like, they actually had a film program, but it was full. You couldn't get into it. And so I was like, all right, well, there was a drama teacher, and she said, well, she was going to do this kind of, only 5 people could be in this class, but she was going to take 5 people, and she was basically going to kind of teach them to be directors, and we got to use the theater group. So I went into this, and I started directing the theater group, and I started making these little films, and we had to pitch the films we wanted to make. And then I went through high school, and I was kind of like, okay, well, I still want to go to university, but I'm going to go to film school and university. I show up in Vancouver because I was in the suburbs, right? But I show up in Vancouver, I'm living there, and within a few months of working at a restaurant, an agent comes in and says he likes my look, and he says, "Hey, I think I'd like you to come in and like do a scene. You could, I represent you as an actor, kind of thing." Turned out to be a really big agent in town, and then I did it, and he took me on, and all of a sudden I became an actor. He says, "But I want you to go into acting class." So I started out as a architect, went into filmmaking, then went into acting, and then I started in my acting class. Pretty soon, my teacher was like, we wrote scenes, and my teacher was like, "You're a pretty good writer. You should start writing." So I started screenwriting. Now, here's the thing. Am I an actor? Am I a writer? Am I a filmmaker? Am I an architect? What am I?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm none. The thing is that each one of these things has all served each other. So whether I decide I want to be an actor or I decide I want to be a filmmaker, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. All these things have served the greater purpose of my own artist journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's part of like what we're talking about, like with trust of that unknown. There's things that we can't even fathom how they even come into play, right? Like things but no matter what, everything in our experience will fuel whatever comes next. We take that wisdom, we take that charge with us no matter what. And, it's such a human thing to do that we judge and we criticize the things we went through. We have our regrets and this and that. And it's just like, no, like it's trust. Bring yourself back to now, that presence and trust. It's like, no, you're exactly where you're supposed to be at all moments in time. That attitude, that when we go through our lives more with that attitude, again, we open ourselves up to a more joyful career, a more joyful life. Mm-hmm. And we make ourselves more available, I think, to amazing things happening in our artistic lives. And again, I can't say what that is, but it's an unknown, but it's a beautiful thing.
It's interesting because I want to say another thing too. I shared a little bit of my journey, right? And people could look at me, they can look at my IMDb credits, and they can look at where I'm at right now in my artist journey. And they could say, well, you're not that successful, you're not super famous. Who are you to tell us what to do? Well, here's the thing. If you start judging people's journeys based on their material or external success, that's your value, not necessarily that artist's value. There was a moment in my life which I would not trade for anything. I would not give it up for an Oscar or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I have perspective on it now. When I was younger, I might have thought, the Oscar, winning the Oscar, most important thing in life.
Yeah.
I could care less about that now. But my values have evolved and I've grown as a person. But you remember a month ago I was telling you, so I built this show, right, with my friends. We built this show, Soldiers of the Apocalypse. We had 123 people at one point doing this little web series production, this TV series production. Most people, 95% of them, showing up out of a labor of love. Mm-hmm. And I remember just thinking like, what? Wow, look what we've done. And I remember telling you this because I got super emotional when I actually voiced this out loud. But my whole thing was like, I just wanted to show everybody, look what we could do. Mm-hmm. Look what's possible. And we made this incredible show with, 42 actors and all these crew. And we had the whole city was like there helping us. This is the most incredible moment in my life. These moments, not just one, there was many, many moments. Mm-hmm. The thing is I look back at that and I go, did it get me a massive amount of success? Did it turn me into a star or something? No, but it was one of those things where I was living my life exactly, fully, 100%. I was living my dream. Mm-hmm. And so the thing is that I want to kind of point this out too, as you embrace your journey. Embrace it on your own terms, with your own values. If your parents come around and say like, hey, well, you're not really successful, you're not really making money at this, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's what matters to you. This is your life, And so, like, listen, here's the other thing. I have lots of people that have come to me and said, you're actually doing it. You're living this thing. And I went and I did this safe job and like, I hate this thing. And I show up and I do this stuff. And I think sometimes, I put pressure on myself. I think maybe I should have done the safe choice. But then I stop and I kind of really connect with like, what are my values?
Yeah.
My values as a young man and still today, where I want to go and I want to pursue my dreams and live my life. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying it was for me. That was my truth. And I was magnetized. I was pulled to that.
Yeah.
So what I'm kind of just encouraging, when you embrace your path, it might be about commercial success, and there's nothing wrong with that. It might be about just painting for the love of painting. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. It's up to you. You get to decide.
Yeah, and it's all like it's all about the feeling. That's how you know. It's the feeling. It's how you feel inside.
Yes.
About what you are doing in your life.
And I want to clarify that because I think this can be confusing. Not any feeling, the feeling of love.
Yes.
The feeling of passion. If it's the feeling of fear and comfort and that shit, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about love connection.
Yes.
Like this thing that matters to you, know?
Yeah. And I think that as you're talking, this is just kind of like coming to me right now, but people talk about, to have courage and to have grit and determination. And it's just like, I know for myself at least, when people have thrown that kind of stuff at me, I just kind of like get turned off by a whole lot of it a lot of the time, but what I'm kind of grasping now is that just like what that really means to have courage, to have grit, is to stay committed to that love, to stay committed to that passion. That's really what it's all about. How much are you driving your life by that? When people are saying like, oh my God, what are you doing? And you're getting all of these things that people are putting their fears onto you about this thing that you're doing. And in the face of all that, how much are you able to go, I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't matter. I am doing this because this is what is in my heart. This is what is in my soul, and I am doing it.
Yes.
And I am doing it because nothing else could ever be as important as that. And nothing is. I don't like to make too many statements about anything, but there's really nothing more important than that. And that's what being and embracing the path is so much about.
Yes.
And we were talking a little about like trust has been such a big part of embracing your path. And one of the things we've talked a lot about, trust is kind of almost this thing out there. Trust about the stuff that's happening around you. But I also want to talk about trusting what is in you, because that is, if not equally important, more important.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it because we're not taught that way. We're taught to pursue all these material things and to kind of demonstrate validity to the outside world.
Yeah.
But
to trust yourself.
Yes.
That's like, that can be a very challenging game, but it is so vital. It is so essential. And the whole thing about like trusting who we are, it's like, what I mean by that is like, what do you think? What do you feel about life, about what's going on? You have a unique perspective. You have a unique experience of the world and of life. And that is what is going to fuel your art. Your life fuels your art. And that requires you to have a connection, a very personal, deep connection to your own life, right? To really consider your own life, and that makes us stronger in our work. Mm-hmm. It makes us stronger in taking our steps, because if we don't trust our own selves, we're getting battered around by the opinions of everybody else.
Yes. This is a big thing that I have been battling of late and have kind of recently, I feel, worked through, and it's been a massive shift for me. When I was younger and I was creating the show and doing all of that stuff, I had this very strong internal locus of control. I had this sense of belief that it was possible and that I was the kind of person that could do it. But I want to point out, it was a very unconscious type of belief. And I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was doing this thing. And so what would happen was any event, anything anyone said to me from the outside world about, I don't know if that's possible, blah, 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 blah. I kind of just almost was like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to do this thing. I believe it's possible. I have this vision. I don't know why. And I believe I'm the kind of person that can do it. And sure enough, pretty soon, we had, as I said, 123 people on a set that, were creating a military spy espionage explosion action show that on no budget, basically. And we're doing this. And the thing is like, before that ever happened, I remember the point where people started to believe me. They started to believe it was possible. Because initially, when I told people what I was going to do, they were like, yeah, sure. But then I remember people were messaging me from London, England, saying, how do I get on your show? I said, well, you're going to have to come to Vancouver, because that's where I'm filming this thing, But I remember when the reality of it started to become real. And I like stories. I feel like stories can really help us grasp onto things.
Yeah.
I went through a period where, in my life, where I went through a lot of challenges, a lot of external challenges in my life. Things happened. Life changed. There's certain tragedies that occurred. And what happened was I started to take on this external locus of control.
Yeah.
I started to go, well, maybe I'm not the kind of person. Maybe I can't make what I really want to happen. Maybe I made this, but I can't really make what I really want to happen, whatever. And I started to buy into these external beliefs and ideas. I got scared, and then I got depressed, and then I started to feel like things were pointless and empty, and it was this weird period in my life. And then what I'd say now is the big shift that happened is I became consciously aware of my internal locus of control. And I started to then start directing my thoughts and my beliefs and things like that, and start to realize, oh, I see what I did when I was younger. I was just unaware of what I was doing. What I was doing was I just decided to embrace my path. That's really all I did. I just said, we're going to make a show. We're going to do this. I'm going to pull in this person. And I never thought for a moment that I wasn't the kind of person that could do it. It was almost like ignorant youth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of doing things more from a conscious wisdom of like, I actually understand that my mind decides first to believe, to embrace, to live this life, and then I go out and do it. It's not that I go out and do it and then I get the belief. It all starts inside of us before. And I think this is what this episode's really about, is we're trying to tell people to start within and then bring this out to the world. Don't wait for the world to tell you what to be. Start being it, and then the world will respond and go, oh, I guess you're this.
Yes. Yeah, like listening to our own voice, trusting in that, taking that step, moving out there. I mean, and I can relate a lot to your story. I mean, when I first started, because, we met each other through acting, and when I started, like, I knew I wanted to be an actor when I was like 9 years old. I was just like, I just decided upon that. I seemed to be able to mimic people, to be able to do voices, whatever, and people were entertained by it, and I loved it. I just like, it just felt amazing. It's like, wow, I can elicit such a response from people through something that's just a bunch of fun play. Like, why the frick else would I want to do anything else?
Right.
But there was a period of time in my life where it was just like, I had this kind of attitude, and some people might think it was cocky or whatever, but I just had this belief that no matter what part I did, no matter what came at me, I was like, I was going to kill it. I was going to do great, and people were going to love it. And I went through, and so many doors opened up for me. Like, I was winning awards and scholarships, like I was, I had former teachers set me up with like meeting casting directors and finding it. Like, all of these doors just were bursting open without, it didn't seem like I was doing anything other than just having fun and doing my thing. And at some point, I took a couple of my experiences that I had, a couple of things that didn't quite go as I wanted, and next thing you know, I went, oh, maybe I'm not going to kill it. Maybe people aren't going to be entertained. And then this doubt crept in. As that doubt crept in, the more I started to buy into that, the unhappier I became, the more I was just like, what am I even doing here? What am I doing this for? And also at the same time, I found the opportunities just seemed to be shrinking. It felt like the whole thing, like at first it was just like, I can do anything. And all of these things were just coming at me. And then suddenly it was just like my whole world just shrank. And it's like, and it was an important thing. It again, as we talked about earlier, it's just led me to another point. It led me to a deeper search within myself as to what am I doing? What do I really want? What is my purpose here? And starting to find that, and a whole new arena opens up, and I've started to find a whole new sense of confidence and belief and trust in what's going on. And now we talk about this on this show.
Well, I think, and with your story too, like, and the part that I relate to too is when I was younger, a lot of my rating as to whether I was doing well or not was based on external success. Did people like me? Did they accept me? Was I admired, respected? Did I get recognition? Was I winning awards? Was I getting what I wanted? Was the material world aligning up the way that I needed it to line up? And this is the thing that I've learned recently. This was one of the big shifts, was that some of us, we actually go out in the world and we get immediate success with the material external world. And we build exactly what you talk about. The whole world seems open. The problem is it's Murphy's Law. Eventually, the external world is going to say no. It's going to close the door on our face. And sometimes I think the whole side of it is it close a few doors all at once.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the world that seemed like it was embracing you and opening to you, and everything was wonderful, suddenly seems to be closed and small to you. And that's when you really find out what how you do life. And the thing is here's the thing. I think that we are in a culture that tells us you're only valid if you're succeeding in the material external world. And so even I can even imagine people listening on the other end of this podcast. Yeah, but how do I succeed? How do I achieve? What if I don't achieve? That's the programming. That's the problem. You don't listen to your own voice because you're always filtering through this other standard of material external success.
And because you don't listen to your own voice, the success success that you're looking for will always kind of remain a mystery, will always just kind of remain out of reach because of where we're coming from. Like what
we're coming at it.
Where's
backwards.
our focus? If our focus is in here, is over there, and it's not right here. It's not on the thing that we're doing. It's not on the step that is right in front of us.
Exactly. And I think we're going to get into the simplicity part of it.
Yeah, I don't want to miss out on this because this is a crucial. I guess crucial. We'll say crucial.
It's crucial, but
it's a very important part. It's a very important part about this because in terms of that whole beginning step,
right?
Especially, setting out onto that path, simplicity is such an important thing to keep in mind. And basically, what that means is that don't overcomplicate things. Don't overcomplicate this thing that you are doing. Don't get caught up too far. Don't be thinking about 10 steps or what might be around the corner over there. Just right here, right now. What is here, right now, presently, that you can do, that you can win, and doesn't have to be anything insane. And when we can keep that sense of simplicity, of just doing the next kind of basic thing, even if it feels like it's not enough, very often it always feels like, oh, I don't feel like I'm doing anything with this. Doesn't matter. That's the first step. That's the first step. Mm-hmm. And as I've found, especially with creativity and with artistry, with anything that I do, whether I'm writing a piece of music or in acting or in writing, when I just do the simple thing, all of these weird, complex things end up just kind of coming out on their own. Not to mention, when you just keep focused on the next simple thing, eventually you have all of these steps of simple things which actually come together to create something that is quite complex and rich. So all of these things that we've been talking about, they have such a relationship to each other. You know, we're talking about beginning, simplicity, the unknown, trust.
Yeah.
You know, like
we're
it's...
I mean, we're talking about, you know, and I think there's another part, too, which we haven't mentioned, which is that there's a process that you're in.
I think we've been talking about the process, actually. And
we don't really need to get into it, but there's a process to all this. And I think the thing is when you talk about simplicity, it's like... It's this simple. You know, people, like, I've written every day, you know this.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to share this because I think it's important. I've written for over 2,000 days in a row. That's over 5 years in a row. Never missed a single day, no matter what has occurred in my life. And you know, the thing that I'll say about this, you want to know how to win this game? Every single day, at some point in the day, you open your writing instrument. You open your journal, you open your laptop, you get a clean piece of paper. That's the first simple step. You have to do that before you can write anything. Don't even worry about whether you're going to write good stuff or bad stuff. It's irrelevant. Have you even opened your journal or opened your book or opened whatever it is that you're going to write in? The thing is that this is our big issue, right? Mm-hmm. We can't switch from neutral to first because we're unwilling to have the humility to acknowledge what first gear is, which is you can't even write anything until you actually have something to write on. Yeah. Get a pen in your hand. Get a piece of paper. Open your laptop and open a document that you can write on, and then look at it. Now you can start to ask, can I write anything good?
Yeah, and it's just about beginning the process and having a sense of excitement to just about that level of the process. Right. You know, I've read about lots of different artists, writers, painters, what have you. They have a ritual before they begin their work. But even though the ritual is them already starting the work, right? But it's in a way, and I'm just kind of realizing this now because I've heard about this and how effective it is, right? Because I don't really necessarily have rituals for myself, but it's kind of creating a sense of enjoyment about the beginning. About starting. You have a ritual. It's like, okay, this is how I set this thing up here. I sit down with my coffee. Like it's this process. It's like, all right, an initiation into it that is like, okay, first step, second step, third step, creating enjoyment around that whole thing, about that humble step forward. Because I think creativity loves a humble step forward.
I think so.
Right? It embraces the person who makes the humble step forward, right? Who just says, I don't know really what I'm doing, but here I go. I'm going to open this up, and I have my pen, I have my coffee, the music is on, and I'm going to start with the first word.
Yes.
And then the second word. And then the third. And then suddenly it's just spilling out.
Yes. And, you know, the other thing, too, is, you know, when it comes to something like persistence and showing up time after time with consistently day after day, you got to give yourself some room to not be anything other than where you are absolutely just at, you know. And the thing is like, I have days where I'm writing and I'm like, this is incredible. I'm writing the best stuff of my life. And then I'll have other days where I'm like, fuck, I just want to get this journal entry over, and I just I got nothing to say, and I'm gonna write one paragraph in my book that I'm working on. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not doing it anymore because but I could write one good paragraph. I don't know if I can write a whole page or a whole section, but I could do this. And the thing is, you make it winnable. You make it like this little thing that you can do. And the thing is a lot of this stuff is just showing up. It's just simply going and just doing that action and not letting fear and all these stories and all this bullshit talk you out of it, right? And I think simplicity is this wonderful thing. And, Evan and I are going to get into simplicity and process and beginning and the unknown and trust. We're going to get into all this stuff in way more detail.
Yeah.
But, right now, the key thing is we're trying to encourage you to go embrace your path. And we're trying to help give you some tools so how to embrace your path and what it'll take,
Yeah.
And then I think you brought a really good filter in. How do we do this with joy? So it's not this painful,
Because otherwise,
thing.
What's the point?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what? This beer is pretty good.
Yes. Yeah. let's talk about this. So
how are you liking it?
It's been going down real good.
Yeah. Well, since there's probably some new people who are just tuning in, we do a craft beer on every podcast currently. We've been doing this, when we did the B&E, which we did 165 episodes, we actually tried 165 different craft beers.
Yeah.
The story really, and I like sharing this, because Evan and I used to get together and we were working on a screenplay, and we would have a beer and we would talk a little bit about our lives as artists, and then they started these conversations, and really this is how Way of the Artist was kind of born. It was really just we were talking about navigating our own way. So today we have Britannia Brewing Company, and this beer is called Adrift, and it's a hop blonde ale, and I'm loving it, man.
Yeah, no, it's a nice, light, fresh beer.
British Columbia.
Yeah, it's been keeping the conversation flowing here. So, and we're not sponsored by them or anything. We just like to drink a nice beer over the course of these podcasts. So.
I also like to sometimes read if they have a little thing on the about the beer.
Please go ahead.
I like to read it. Inspired by our homes, surrounded by the ocean and mountains, this natural ale is brewed with generous late hop additions, creating aromas of citrus and tropical fruit. The palate is balanced and dry with subtle bitterness to complete this refreshing ale. Set yourself adrift. Anyway, it's not an ad or anything. It's just we just drink a beer. We randomly pick one. Usually they're a local craft brew. But there's an artistry to beer.
Absolutely.
And we've learned to kind of appreciate that over all these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's another artistry, right?
And I think I think if anything, you get together with that someone else, and you have a coffee or you have a beer or you have a meal or whatever you have. This is a way for us to just share and communicate and talk about stuff that matters to us, and obviously artistry does. And I think as we've gone through this, it's been, we're just beginning this whole new thing of Way of the Artist. But in many ways, this is a very old podcast, because our last podcast we did for really a couple years. Mm-hmm. And so, this is a new beginning, a new chapter, but we kind of started that first podcast just kind of going, well, let's just have some conversations and see what happens. And it was an awesome journey. But I think we hit a certain point where we went, well, let's see what we can actually maybe take this and do with this and tailor it.
It was very much kind of what we're talking about here today, of just stepping out onto the path with trust and not knowing and keeping it simple and just experiencing it and the whole process of it unfolding. It's been in many ways it's very much a symbol of what we're talking about today, and how far that has come, and all of the amazing twists and turns that have happened along the way in our careers and in our lives, and with this show. So I think we've pretty much covered what we wanted to cover. And for me, just to kind of, for myself, summing some of this up, we're calling this embrace the path, or embracing your path. And a lot of things we were talking about, it's like embrace the unknown, embrace just beginning on wherever you're at, this new thing that you've either just first foraying into, or this new evolution that you've found yourself in as an artist, or and embracing simplicity, embracing this whole thing just unfolding with a sense of trust. That's the biggest thing that I can try to impart in this episode, and getting yourself going.
Yeah. I think the thing that I want to leave people with, because we were originally going to call this episode Being on Your Path. And, I want to offer up an idea that being on your path, or embracing your path, is like believing in your path. And if you break down the word believe, it's being and living. Be as though you live, right? And this is your life. You get to be, and you get to go about it how you want to go about it. And the thing is don't live your life based on someone else's values and someone else's standards. I hope that this episode makes you kind of walk away and maybe think like, what do I care about? What is it inside of me that matters? And if this made you consider that was valid, then I think we achieved the goal here. Mm-hmm. And the next episode, if you haven't listened to the first, definitely listen to the first, because it will inform this one, and it will inform the last one. But not the last, but the next in this foundational kind of series of episodes, because we're going to talk about claiming the path.
Yes.
And this is going to be really cool.
Which is kind of, claim your own path is that's our slug to the whole thing.
Yes.
That's kind of our motto. So the next one's going to be some juice, man. I mean, I feel like we've already dove into some juice with this one, but it's just going to keep going.
Yes.
With the next one.
And so these first 3 episodes, if you've listened to this before anything else, or maybe you listen to it later after you've listened to later episodes, who knows? These are, our idea was we wanted to build a few foundational episodes that really kind of just give you what you need to start going on your path. And what's really exciting is no one really knows what that is, not even yourself. And, at first you're going to find it. Now you're going to embrace it. And the next thing is you're about to claim it. And once you're on the claiming, it's like, I think you're going to start to see that the world opens up to you in a new and very cool way.
I felt that as you said it. I was just like, ooh, yeah, I feel it, man. I feel it. Yeah. And I hope you feel it too.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.